Rome did not fall in a single moment. It faded slowly, unevenly, almost quietly. By the year 500, the Western Roman Empire had vanished, its emperors replaced by barbarian kings, its cities shrinking, its legions gone. Only the Eastern Roman Empire remained, ruling from Constantinople and still calling itself Roman, even as much of the world believed Rome to be nothing more than a memory. It was an empire rich in gold and law, but cautious, defensive, and deeply aware that it was living in the shadow of a greater past. Into this world, around the year 500 CE, was born a man who would briefly make Rome feared again. His name was Flavius Belisarius. Belisarius was born in the Balkan frontier of the empire, most likely in Thrace or Illyria, a region shaped not by marble forums and senatorial debates, but by fortresses, marching columns, and the constant threat of invasion. These lands were Rome's shield, but also its wound, repeatedly struck by Goths, Huns, Slavs, and other peoples pressing against imperial borders. Life here was harsh, disciplined, and practical. We know little of Belisarius's family, but the silence itself is revealing. He did not come from the ancient Roman aristocracy. He was not raised among senators or scholars. He was shaped by the frontier, by insecurity, and by the understanding that survival depended on preparation, obedience, and force. This was a time when the Roman army was no longer the massive, unstoppable machine of earlier centuries. It was smaller, more flexible, and increasingly reliant on commanders who could do more with less. Cavalry had become more important than heavy infantry, and wars were often fought defensively against enemies who knew Roman tactics well. Belisarius grew up in an empire that could no longer afford waste or arrogance. Every soldier mattered. Every decision carried weight. These realities would shape his entire career. As a young man, Belisarius entered imperial service, likely joining the elite units attached to the emperor himself. This was not a glamorous path to fame, but it placed him close to power and, more importantly, close to the machinery of command. Around the same time, another figure was rising rapidly in Constantinople. Justinian, nephew of Emperor Justin I, was ambitious, intelligent, and utterly convinced that history had chosen him for greatness. While others focused on survival, Justinian dreamed of restoration. He believed the Roman Empire could be rebuilt, its lost western provinces reclaimed, its authority reasserted across the Mediterranean. For this vision, he would need a general capable of winning wars the empire could barely afford to fight. Belisarius stood out almost immediately. He was calm under pressure, disciplined and cautious without being timid. Unlike many commanders of the age, he did not rely on reckless aggression or brute force. He prepared carefully, studied terrain, and maintained strict control over his troops. Justinian noticed him early, and soon Belisarius was entrusted with real command. His first major test came not in the west, but in the east, against Rome's ancient and formidable rival, the Sasanian Persian Empire. In the late 520s, tensions along the eastern frontier erupted into open war. Persia fielded experienced armies, elite cavalry, and commanders who understood Roman tactics as well as the Romans themselves. For Belisarius, this was a trial by fire. In 530, near the fortress city of Dara, Belisarius faced a Persian army larger than his own. Instead of retreating or charging headlong into battle, he prepared the battlefield itself. He ordered trenches dug in front of his lines, disrupting Persian cavalry charges. He anchored his infantry in defensive positions and concealed his cavalry on the flanks. When the Persians attacked, confident in their numbers, they collided with prepared Roman defenses. At the critical moment, Belisarius unleashed his cavalry in a coordinated counterattack that shattered the Persian flanks and turned the battle into a rout. The victory at Dara was decisive and deeply symbolic. Rome had not merely survived, it had outthought and outfought one of the greatest powers of the age. Belisarius followed this with a mixed record in the east, including a setback at Callinicum, but his reputation remained intact. Justinian trusted him, and soon that trust would be tested, not on a battlefield, but in the streets of Constantinople itself. In 532, the capital exploded in violence. What began as unrest between rival chariot racing factions, the Blues and the Greens, escalated into a full-scale rebellion known as the Nika riots. Large sections of the city burned. Thousands joined the uprising. A rival emperor was proclaimed. Justinian, terrified, prepared to flee. It was Empress Theodora who refused, declaring that imperial purple was a noble burial shroud. Justinian stayed, and Belisarius was ordered to act. With a small force of loyal troops, Belisarius entered the hippodrome, where tens of thousands of rebels were gathered. There would be no speeches, no compromise. The exits were sealed. The troops advanced. By the end of the day, more than 30,000 rebels lay dead. It was a brutal massacre, but it saved the throne and preserved the empire. From that moment on, Belisarius was no longer merely a general. He was the man who had saved Justinian's rule. Now Justinian turned fully toward his great ambition: reconquest of the West. His first target was North Africa, ruled by the Vandal Kingdom. The Vandals had seized the province decades earlier and grown wealthy and complacent. They controlled some of the richest lands of the former Roman world, but they underestimated the empire they had once defeated. In 533, Belisarius sailed from Constantinople with around 15,000 men, a force far smaller than what earlier Roman emperors might have deployed, but carefully chosen and well led. Belisarius landed in Africa and advanced cautiously. He enforced strict discipline, forbidding looting and mistreatment of civilians. This was not merely moral restraint, it was strategy. The local Roman population, alienated by Vandal rule, began to support him. At the Battle of Ad Decimum, just outside Carthage, the Vandals nearly destroyed the Roman army. Confusion, poor coordination, and near disaster threatened to undo the campaign. But the Vandals failed to press their advantage. Belisarius rallied his forces, counterattacked decisively, and turned defeat into victory. Soon after, at Tricamarum, he crushed the remaining Vandal army. Within a year, the Vandal kingdom was gone. North Africa, one of Rome's most valuable provinces, was back under imperial control. The victory was astonishing. A kingdom had fallen with stunning speed. Belisarius returned to Constantinople in triumph, but Justinian was not finished. The true prize was Italy, the heartland of the old Western Empire, ruled by the Ostrogoths. In 535, Belisarius was sent west once again. The Italian campaign would be long, brutal, and exhausting. Belisarius began by taking Sicily without resistance, then crossed into Italy itself. Cities fell one by one, often through negotiation rather than force. In 536, Belisarius entered Rome. The city, once the center of the world, was now sparsely populated and decayed, but its symbolic value was immense. Rome was Roman again. Holding it, however, proved far harder than taking it. The Ostrogoths returned with a massive army and laid siege to the city. For more than a year, Belisarius defended Rome against overwhelming odds. He repaired walls, managed supplies, launched sudden attacks, and used psychological warfare to undermine Gothic morale. Disease, starvation, and exhaustion plagued both sides, yet Rome held. Despite these achievements, politics began to intrude. Justinian, ruling from afar, grew suspicious. Belisarius was becoming too famous, too beloved by his soldiers, too powerful in the eyes of the public. Rival commanders were sent to Italy, fragmenting authority and complicating operations. Resources were limited, orders were contradictory. Even so, Belisarius pushed north, eventually capturing Ravenna, the Gothic capital. When the Goths offered him the Western imperial crown in a desperate attempt to save themselves, Belisarius refused. He accepted their surrender in Justinian's name alone, proving his loyalty beyond doubt. That loyalty was not rewarded. Belisarius was recalled to Constantinople and increasingly sidelined. The Italian war dragged on without him, descending into chaos and destruction. Justinian continued to use Belisarius when desperate, but never fully trusted him again. The general who had reconquered half the western Mediterranean was now treated with suspicion. Even in decline, Belisarius remained indispensable. When new threats emerged along the empire's borders, Justinian turned once more to the aging general. In 559, when Bulgar and Slavic forces threatened Constantinople itself, Belisarius, now in his late 50s or early 60s, took command of a small force and drove them off. It was his final victory, achieved with the same calm efficiency that had defined his entire career. Belisarius died in 565, the same year as Justinian. In later centuries, a powerful legend emerged claiming that Justinian had blinded him and cast him into poverty, forcing him to beg in the streets of Constantinople. The story is dramatic and memorable, but almost certainly false. Contemporary evidence suggests that Belisarius died wealthy, respected, though politically marginalized. Yet legends are rarely born without reason. The myth reflects a deeper truth about his life, that a man who gave everything to the empire received far less in return. After Belisarius, Justinian's reconquests slowly unraveled. Italy collapsed into ruin. The empire weakened. Rome would never again be truly restored. But for a brief moment, under one general, the Roman world had remembered what it once was. Discipline had overcome numbers, intelligence had defeated arrogance, loyalty had triumphed over ambition. Flavius Belisarius was not the last Roman, but he was the last great Roman general, a man born into decline who forced history, for a short and brilliant time, to turn backward. If you enjoyed this journey through the life of Flavius Belisarius, remember that history is not just a list of dates and battles. It is the story of people who lived, struggled, and shaped the world we inherited. Beyond Time exists to tell those stories, slowly, carefully, and in full. If you want more deep cinematic histories like this one, consider subscribing to Beyond Time. New stories await, buried in the past, waiting to be remembered. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you beyond time.